Still no word on the whereabouts of your son's fiancée. Sorry, Jonah.
It's all my fault. I just couldn't see it. He was a thief! A criminal! He stole my suit! He's a menace to the entire city! I want that wall-crawling arachnid prosecuted! I want him strung up by his web! I want Spider-Man!
The rain over Manhattan that night tasted like rust and regret. John Jonah Jamison had stood in this same church once before, 4 years earlier, on the night his wife, Marjorie, died. He remembered the smell of incense and candle wax, the way the priest's voice had cracked when he said the words, irreparable damage. Peter Parker, Spider-Man, had been too late. Some punk with a high-tech glider and a grudge had put a blade through Marjorie's chest on the roof of the Bugle. Spider-Man had swung in, webs flying, but the damage was already done. Jamison had watched from the street below as the kid in the red and blue suit cradled his wife's body like it was something fragile he'd broken. That night, Jamison stopped believing in second chances. He stopped believing in heroes. All he believed in now was the truth, printed in bold black ink, and the cold comfort of rage. Tonight, he was back in the same pew, third from the back, collar of his trench coat turned up against the chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The Daily Bugle had run its usual evening edition, another scathing front-page takedown of Spider-Man's latest miracle save that Jamison knew in his bones was just another cover for the kid's growing ego. But the words felt hollow tonight. Marjorie's empty side of the bed still haunted him. The anger had calcified into something heavier, something that made his chest ache when he tried to sleep. So he prayed. Not for forgiveness, he wasn't that naive. He prayed for the strength to keep hating the wall crawler the way he deserved to be hated. The bells began to toll, not the gentle call to evening mass. These were the old iron monsters in the belfry, ringing like the city itself was screaming. Jamison's head snapped up. Something was wrong. High above, silhouetted against the stained glass window that glowed blood red in the stormlight, a figure thrashed on the narrow catwalk. Red and black. The colors shifted, glistening like oil on water. Spider-Man, Parker, was clawing at his own chest, trying to tear something off him that didn't want to leave. Jamison's first instinct was to reach for the camera he always kept in his coat pocket. His second was to stay perfectly still. He knew that suit. He'd mocked it 1,000 times. But this was different. The black tendrils whipped and lashed like living whips. Parker was screaming, raw, human, terrified. The bells kept ringing. Each peal hit the air like a hammer on glass. Jamison watched, transfixed, as the black mass recoiled. It slithered, fought, screamed in a voice that wasn't quite sound. Parker ripped it free with a final, desperate heave. The symbiote, because that's what it had to be, some alien thing the Bugle would have called Spider-Man's latest freakish power-up, plummeted straight down through the open bell tower shaft. It hit the stone floor 3 pews in front of Jamison with a wet slap. For one frozen second, the church was silent, except for the dying echo of the bells. The black mass twitched. It was alive. It hurt. Jamison's hand was already moving before his brain caught up. He wasn't thinking about Marjorie. He wasn't thinking about the Bugle. He was thinking about the way Spider-Man had looked up there, weak, exposed, human. And something ugly and hungry uncoiled in Jonah's chest. The symbiote sensed it. Hunger recognized hunger. It surged. Jamison tried to stand, but the black tendrils were faster. They wrapped around his ankle first, then his calf, then his waist. Cold, wet, meaty. He felt it crawl under the cuffs of his trousers, up the sleeves of his coat, slipping between the buttons of his shirt, like it was putting on a second skin. He opened his mouth to curse, but the symbiote filled the space behind his teeth before the words could form. And then, "We are the same." The voice was his own, but deeper, older, sharper. It tasted like printer's ink and graveyard dirt. Jamison's vision sharpened. The stained glass saints above him seemed to sneer. He could hear Parker's ragged breathing from the belfry, the kid's heart hammering like a guilty man's. He could smell the fear sweat on the boy's skin from 50 feet away. A grin split Jamison's face, wide, vicious, and not entirely his own. "Parker," he whispered, and the symbiote purred in agreement. Up in the belfry, Peter Parker collapsed to his knees, the red suit back in place, chest heaving. He had no idea what had just happened below. He only knew the weight was gone. The anger was gone. The noise in his head had finally quieted. He didn't see Jonah Jamison rise from the pew, coat now glistening with living black veins that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. He didn't see the editor's eyes flash white for a split second before returning to their usual stormy grey. But the symbiote saw, and it remembered the face of the man who had once been too late to save a life. Jamison flexed his fingers. The black suit rippled, forming jagged spikes along his shoulders that looked suspiciously like the points of a newsroom pencil. He rolled his neck, cracked his knuckles, and spoke in a voice that carried through the empty church like a headline. "Gotcha, webhead." He took one step toward the exit, then paused. The symbiote whispered possibilities, power, revenge, truth, and Jamison listened. For the first time in 4 years, Jonah Jamison wasn't just angry, he was hungry. The black suit fit Jonah Jamison like a second skin made of pure spite. It whispered to him in the voice of every headline he'd ever written, every lie he'd ever told himself about heroes. They're all the same, all of them. He stepped out of the church into the storm, coattails snapping like wings, and the symbiote drank the rain like it was fuel. Peter Parker never saw him leave. The kid was still up in the belfry, gasping, thinking the nightmare was over. It was only beginning. Jamison's first stop was the little Queen's house with the white picket fence that had somehow survived every disaster New York could throw at it. Aunt May Parker was watering her roses when the front door exploded inward. She turned, garden hose still in hand, and stared into the grinning white eyes of the creature that used to be her nephew's boss. "Jamison," she whispered. The symbiote answered for him. "Call me Venom." Tendrils lashed out, fast as camera flashes. May swung the hose like a club, bless her stubborn heart, but the black mass caught her midair and slammed her through the living room wall. Plaster and picture frames rained down. The last thing she saw before blacking out was Jamison's face, twisted in a smile that didn't belong to him, screaming, "This is for every time that spider brat made my life hell." When the paramedics arrived, Aunt May was barely breathing. The news ticker on every channel in the city screamed, "Aunt May Parker in critical condition, Spider-Man's family targeted." Peter got the call while he was still in his red suit, crouched on a rooftop, trying to shake off the hollow feeling the symbiote had left behind. He swung toward the hospital so fast the world blurred. Across town, in a dimly lit hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and regret, Flint Marco, Sandman, sat beside his daughter Penny's bed. The little girl's eyes were closed, machines beeping softly. He'd already become the monster the papers called Sandman, grains of himself shifting restlessly under his coat. All he wanted was enough cash to get her the treatment the doctors kept saying was experimental. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead and whispered the same promise he'd been making for months. Then the screaming started down the hall. Flint stepped into the corridor, just in time to see it. A black-suited nightmare with jagged white eyes and a maw full of teeth, dragging a struggling boy by the ankle. The kid couldn't have been more than 13, skinny, wide-eyed, wearing a homemade Spider-Man hoodie 2 sizes too big. Miles Morales, Just another kid from the neighborhood who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time, maybe sneaking in to visit a sick relative. The symbiote didn't care. It only cared that the boy had shouted, "Leave that old lady alone," when Venom had come for May. Venom lifted miles off the ground. "Another webhead wannabe," the creature snarled in Jamison's gravelly baritone, twisted and wet. "Time to clean up the city." The boy's scream was cut short. The body dropped like a broken doll. Flint felt the sand inside him turn to glass. His own daughter's face flashed in his mind. A kid. Just a kid. "You son of a..." Sandman roared, body exploding into a swirling storm of grit. He slammed into Venom like a freight train made of a desert. The two monsters crashed through the hospital windows and into the rain-slick street below, trading blows that shattered asphalt. Venom laughed the whole time, tendrils whipping, trying to wrap around Sandman's shifting form. "Come on, Marco," Venom hissed, voice dripping with that familiar Jamison sneer. "Join me. We take down the bug together. You get your money, I get my truth. Win-win." Flint's fist, solid as concrete now, drove straight into Venom's jaw. "You killed a kid. For what? Headlines? I ain't teaming with no child-murdering freak." The fight spilled across 3 blocks before Venom finally retreated, laughing like a broken news ticker. "Your loss, Sand for Brains. I've got better allies." Harry Osborn was in the Oscorp penthouse when the black-suited editor smashed through the skylight. The new goblin glider was already half assembled on the workbench. Harry's eyes were bloodshot from the goblin formula, but the hatred for Peter Parker still burned clean. Venom landed in a crouch, symbiote rippling. "Osborn, you hate the bug. I hate the bug. Let's make him bleed." Harry's grin was all teeth. "You had me at bleed." They shook on it, clawed hand to gloved one. Meanwhile, the city learned what real fear tasted like. Spider-Man swung through a nightmare. Betty Brandt, sweet, sharp-tongued Betty from the Bugle, was found strangled in an alley behind the coffee shop she loved, black tendrils still dissolving from her throat. Gwen Stacy, the bright-eyed classmate Peter had once taken to the science fair, lay broken on a rooftop with a note pinned to her chest in Jamison's handwriting. "Tell Parker the truth. Always hurts." Ned Leeds, Peter's oldest friend from the Bugle darkroom, never made it home from his shift. Robbie Robertson, steady, decent Robbie, the man who tried to keep the Bugle honest, was dragged from his car and left for the morning crew to find. And MJ's father, Mary Jane Watson stood in the doorway of her family apartment, mascara running, staring at the body on the welcome mat, while police lights painted the walls red and blue. She didn't scream. She just looked up at the sky and whispered, "Peter, where are you?" Peter heard about the spree while he was at Aunt May's bedside, holding her hand, mask off, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on his face. The nurse turned on the TV for the latest report. Every victim's name hit him like a truck. His friends, his city, his life. He was still reeling when the sand began pouring through the hospital vents. Flint Marco stepped out of the wall itself, grains reforming into a tired, broken man. "Parker." Peter tensed, webs ready. "Sandman, not now. I know who you are," Flint said quietly. "Been watching, been thinking. That night, the night your uncle died, it wasn't supposed to go down like that. My partner, he startled me. Gun went off. I never meant to. I swear on my daughter's life, kid. I ain't proud of what I became after." Peter's fists shook. Sadness crashed over him first, then the old familiar spike of anger. He remembered the blood on the sidewalk, the way Uncle Ben's eyes had gone glassy. But the symbiote's echo in his own head from the night before was still fresh. He remembered how close he'd come to letting the rage win. How many times he'd failed people he loved. "I've done horrible things too," Peter said, voice cracking. "Things I can't take back. If I can ask for another chance, maybe you deserve one." Flint stared at him a long moment. Then he extended a gritty hand. "Truce?" Peter took it. "Truce. We stop this thing together, before it takes anyone else." Outside, the city lights flickered as thunder rolled. Somewhere in the shadows, Venom and the new goblin were already planning their next move. two monsters wearing the faces of men Peter had once trusted, and Mary Jane was still standing in that doorway, staring at the sky, waiting for her hero to finally show up before there was nothing left to save. The stakes had never been higher. Venom and the New Goblin struck at midnight, coordinated like a perfectly timed front-page scoop. Mary Jane Watson was rehearsing lines at a half-empty theater when black tendrils smashed through the skylight. She barely had time to scream before the symbiote wrapped around her waist and yanked her into the night. At the same moment, across town, in the children's ward, Flint Marco's 8-year-old daughter Penny was snatched from her bed, IV lines ripped free, monitors screaming, as Venom's mocking laugh echoed down the sterile halls. "Two birds, one webhead," the creature snarled in Jamison's voice. "Let's see how the bug dances when we dangle his precious people." But Harry Osborn went further. Consumed by goblin rage and the promise of total victory, the New Goblin dove through the hospital window on his glider. Security guards were swatted aside like flies. Harry scooped the still bandaged Aunt May from her bed, her frail body cradled roughly in one arm, while he laughed maniacally. "Parker took my father. Now I take everything he loves." The message arrived via a stolen Bugle News chopper broadcast, beamed live across every screen in New York, the 3 hostages dangling from a half-constructed skyscraper on the edge of the city. MJ gagged and terrified, little Penny crying softly, Aunt May clutching her side in pain. Venom and the New Goblin stood on the girders above them, silhouetted against the storm-lit sky. "Spider-Man," Venom roared, white eyes blazing, jagged teeth gleaming. "Come alone, or they all fall. And this time, no one's too late." Peter swung in with Flint Marco at his side, Sandman riding the wind like a living sandstorm. The alliance was uneasy, but real. Peter's red suit was torn in places, his eyes hollow from grief and guilt. Flint's form shifted constantly, grains swirling with paternal fury. The final battle erupted on the skeletal frame of the building, high above the glittering streets. Wind howled, lightning cracked. Harry attacked first, glider screaming through the air, pumpkin bombs exploding in showers of green fire. Sandman met him head-on, swelling into a towering giant of concrete and grit, slamming the New Goblin across the beams. Peter webbed and dodged, trying desperately to reach the hostages, while Venom's tendrils lashed out like living whips, faster, stronger, meaner than anything Peter had faced when he'd worn the suit himself. "You did this, Parker," Venom bellowed, voice a twisted blend of Jamison's fury and the symbiote's alien hunger. "Your failures, your lateness, your precious great power. I'm just printing the truth in blood." MJ struggled against her bonds, eyes locking with Peter's for a split second. "Peter, save them first." A brutal exchange followed. Sandman shattered girders trying to pin Harry, while Peter and Venom traded blows that cracked steel. Tendrils sliced Peter's suit, fists cracked ribs. At one point, Venom nearly impaled Peter with Harry's own glider blade, but Flint intervened, turning his arm into a sand shield that absorbed the strike. Then the turning point came. Harry, bloodied and wild-eyed on his glider, hovered near the dangling hostages. He looked down at Aunt May, old, fragile, the woman who had practically raised Peter, and then at little Penny, sobbing quietly, no older than the kids Harry once played with before his own life turned to poison. Something in his goblin-maddened mind cracked. He saw his father's face in the reflection of the glider, Norman's mad grin, the endless cycle of rage and revenge. Harry lowered the glider. "No, this isn't what I wanted." Venom whirled on him. "Osborn, don't you dare." But Harry had already made his choice. He cut MJ and Penny free with a precise glider blade, webbing them gently to a lower platform where they could be safe. He then scooped Aunt May and delivered her into Sandman's waiting sandy cradle. "Get them down, Marco, now." Flint didn't hesitate. He flowed down the building like an avalanche in reverse, carrying the 3 to waiting emergency crews below. MJ had a nasty gash on her arm and bruised ribs. Penny had scrapes and shock but was otherwise okay. Aunt May was shaken and sore, yet alive, and whispering thanks. Harry landed beside Peter, mask retracted, face pale. "I was blinded, Pete. Rage, revenge. I let it turn me into him, my father. I'm sorry for everything." Peter stood there, breathing hard, suit torn, blood on his knuckles. The anger was there, years of pain, the scars Harry had left, but so was the memory of every time he'd let darkness win. He looked at his old friend and saw the broken boy underneath the goblin paint. I forgive you, Harry," Peter said reluctantly, voice thick. "It doesn't erase what happened, but I forgive you." Harry managed a weak, genuine smile. "You're better than my father ever was. Better than I was. I'll turn myself in, face what I've done, tell the truth, for once." Before Peter could reply, Venom charged with a primal scream, betrayed, furious, the symbiote amplifying Jamison's lifelong vendetta into something apocalyptic. "Traitors, all of you! The Bugle will run the real headline tomorrow. Spider-Man dies screaming." The 3 turned on the monster. Peter remembered the church bells, the weakness. He webbed metal pipes and beams together into a makeshift sonic gauntlet, slamming them repeatedly with superhuman strength. The deafening clangs ripped through the air like thunder. Venom howled, black form writhing and shrinking, tendrils flailing wildly. Flint Marco surged forward as a living sandhammer, pummeling the weakened creature while Peter coordinated the noise. Harry fired the last of his glider missiles to keep the symbiote off balance. In the final desperate moment, as the alien tried to slither free of Jamison's body, Peter and Flint struck together. Peter webbed the symbiote mass, while Flint compressed it into a dense, suffocating shell of hardened sand and shattered concrete. The combined pressure and the relentless sonic assault crushed the alien organism. Jonah Jamison, still conscious inside the dying black mass, gasped one last bitter curse before the life left his eyes. The symbiote dissolved into harmless black goo that washed away in the rain. Jamison's body lay still on the girder, gone, along with the monster that had worn his rage like armor. The night ended in sirens and flashing lights. MJ limped into Peter's arms on the ground below, holding him tight despite her minor injuries. Penny ran to her father, who knelt in human form and wept with relief, promising her the treatment she needed. He'd find another way, a better way. Aunt May hugged them all, whispering that sometimes the greatest power was choosing mercy over vengeance. Harry Osborn stood apart for a moment, then walked toward the police line, hands raised. Before they cuffed him, he turned back to Peter one last time. "Take care of the city, Pete. And thanks for forgiving a fool." Peter nodded, reluctant but sincere. "We all get second chances. Use yours right." As the chaos settled and the survivors were taken to safety, Peter stood on a nearby rooftop with MJ, watching the sunrise paint the city gold. The weight of the losses, Betty, Gwen, Ned, Robbie, and so many others, still ached. But the cycle of rage had finally broken, or so it seemed. Twist ending, weeks later, at the quiet funeral for Jonah Jamison, attended by a surprisingly somber bugle staff and a few city officials, a single black tendril, missed in the chaos and hidden in the lining of Jamison's old trench coat, slithered away into the sewers. It carried with it every ounce of the editor's undying hatred, and a new, patient hunger. Somewhere in the darkness beneath New York, it waited, watching, learning. The headline had not yet been written.